A woman can notice far more about an older man before he even says a word. His presence, the way he carries himself, and the energy he brings into the room can speak louder than his age, money, or appearance. And some of the things women notice first are probably not what most men expect. Let's start with number 1. Topic 1. His presence before he even says a word. When a woman meets an older man, one of the first things she can notice is something he never has to say: how comfortable he seems in his own skin. Before the conversation really begins, she may notice his posture, his pace, his eye contact, and whether he looks like a man who belongs wherever he is. A man who walks into a room without constantly checking who is watching him sends a very different message from one who seems desperate for approval. At this stage, he isn't trying to impress her. His body is already doing the talking. And interestingly, that quiet presence can become more noticeable with age, because experience can either create confidence or expose insecurity. There is a simple difference between presence and performance. A man with presence doesn't need to dominate the room, tell impressive stories, or act like the most important person there. He can sit comfortably, listen, smile, make natural eye contact, and speak without rushing every sentence. Think about a man at a coffee shop who isn't glued to his phone, isn't scanning the room for validation, and doesn't seem uncomfortable being alone. He looks like someone who enjoys his own company, and that communicates something powerful before he ever introduces himself. That's why an older man doesn't need to compete with younger men by trying to look or behave younger than he is. His advantage can be the calm that comes from having already lived through things that once seemed enormous. A job loss, a failed relationship, a difficult season, a major success. Those experiences can either make a man bitter or make him steadier. And when that steadiness becomes visible in the way he carries himself, a woman may start wondering what else is behind that calm exterior, because the next thing she notices is often much more personal. Topic 2. The way he takes care of himself. One of the first things a woman may notice about an older man is whether he still takes pride in taking care of himself. Not because he needs to look 25, but because grooming quietly communicates self-respect. Clean hair, a well-maintained beard, healthy-looking skin, fresh breath, clean nails, and clothes that actually fit can change the entire impression a man creates. None of this requires designer brands or spending hours in front of a mirror. A simple, well-fitted shirt, clean shoes, a subtle fragrance, and a haircut that suits his face can say more than an expensive outfit ever could. And there is an important distinction here. Looking older is not the problem. Looking neglected is. A man doesn't need to hide gray hair, wrinkles, or the natural changes that come with age. In fact, trying too hard to erase every sign of aging can sometimes make him look less comfortable with himself. The better approach is maintenance, rather than disguise. Regular exercise, a basic skincare routine, a haircut every few weeks, clothes appropriate for his body today, and even something as simple as replacing worn-out shoes can make a noticeable difference. Consider two men of the same age walking into the same restaurant. One looks as though he stopped paying attention to himself 10 years ago. His clothes are oversized, his shoes are worn down, and his grooming feels like an afterthought. The other has gray hair, visible lines on his face, and the same age, but he looks clean, healthy, composed, and intentional. The difference isn't youth, it's care. And once a woman notices that a man respects himself physically, she may start paying attention to something even more revealing: how comfortably he carries the age he has earned. Topic 3. How he carries his age. There's something surprisingly attractive about a man who doesn't seem embarrassed by getting older. A woman may notice very quickly whether he carries his age like a burden or like evidence that he has lived. Gray hair, wrinkles, a slower pace, or a different style don't automatically make a man less attractive. What matters is the attitude behind them. When he seems comfortable saying, "Yes, I'm older and I'm good with that," there's a quiet strength in it. He isn't asking anyone to pretend he's 30. And that confidence can make his age feel like an asset rather than an apology. The mistake some older men make is trying to compete with younger men on younger men's terms. They may force themselves into trends that don't fit, use exaggerated slang, or constantly talk about how young they still feel. There's nothing wrong with staying active, dressing well, enjoying new music, or keeping up with culture, but there's a difference between being youthful and performing youth. A man who can wear a well-fitted jacket, speak naturally, and enjoy himself without trying to prove that he belongs to another generation often comes across as far more secure. Imagine a woman sitting across from a man who says, almost casually, "I'm 58, and honestly, I like this stage of my life more than I expected." That single attitude can reveal more than a carefully rehearsed story about his accomplishments. He knows what he has learned, he knows what he no longer wants, and he doesn't need to apologize for either one. But that kind of acceptance raises another question in her mind. If he is genuinely comfortable with who he has become, does he also have the confidence to stand firmly in that identity without needing to prove himself? Topic 4. His confidence without the need to prove anything. One of the most revealing things a woman may notice in an older man is whether his confidence feels natural or manufactured. A confident man doesn't need to constantly mention his career, money, connections, accomplishments, or the women he's dated. He can talk about his life without turning the conversation into a resume. There is something powerful about a man who knows his value, but doesn't need everyone around him to confirm it. At this stage of life, real confidence often becomes quieter. And ironically, that quietness can make it much easier to notice. A man trying to prove himself may dominate the conversation, interrupt frequently, exaggerate his achievements, or turn every topic into an opportunity to demonstrate superiority. The confident man does something different. He can disagree without becoming defensive, admit when he doesn't know something, and even laugh at himself when the situation calls for it. Imagine a woman mentioning a subject he knows very little about. Instead of pretending to be an expert, he simply says, "I don't know much about that, tell me about it." That small sentence can communicate more emotional security than 10 minutes of bragging. And there's another subtle test of confidence: how he reacts when he doesn't get immediate attention. If a woman takes longer to respond, disagrees with him, or isn't visibly impressed, does he become cold, sarcastic, or desperate to win her back? Or does he remain relaxed and continue being himself? A mature man understands that attraction cannot be forced, and he doesn't treat every interaction like an audition. But confidence becomes even more meaningful when it extends beyond how he treats the woman in front of him, because the way he treats everyone else can reveal whether that confidence is actually part of his character. Topic 5. The way he talks to people who can't give him anything. One of the fastest ways to understand a man is to watch how he treats people he doesn't need. A woman may notice how he speaks to a waiter, a cashier, a hotel employee, a younger person, or someone who simply happens to cross his path. When there is nothing to gain, the mask usually becomes unnecessary. A man who is polite only when someone has status isn't displaying confidence, he's displaying calculation. Real character tends to appear in those ordinary moments when nobody expects him to perform. Imagine a couple having dinner at a restaurant in New York, and the server makes a small mistake with the order. One man immediately becomes irritated, raises his voice, and makes sure everyone knows how unacceptable the mistake was. Another simply explains the problem and allows the person to correct it. The second man isn't being weak or passive, he's demonstrating self-control. He understands that being capable of demanding respect doesn't mean making another person feel small, and that distinction can be incredibly revealing to someone watching from across the table. This becomes even more important for an older man because experience should ideally produce perspective. A man who has built a career, raised a family, survived difficult relationships, or simply lived long enough to understand life's unpredictability has little reason to feel powerful by humiliating someone else. Small acts matter: saying thank you, being patient when something goes wrong, listening when a younger person speaks, or treating a service worker with the same courtesy he would give a CEO. But there's another behavior women may notice that reveals character in an entirely different way. Whether he is actually listening when she speaks, or simply waiting for his turn to talk. Topic 6. Whether he actually listens. A woman can usually tell when a man is listening to her, and when he's simply waiting for his turn to speak. An older man may have decades of stories, opinions, achievements, and experiences, but none of that automatically makes him interesting. What can make him stand out is his ability to become genuinely curious about the person sitting across from him. He doesn't constantly redirect the conversation back to himself, and he doesn't treat every sentence she says as an invitation to tell a bigger story. He pays attention, because he understands that attention itself is a form of respect. There is a simple test for this. Does he remember what she told him? If she casually mentions that she has a daughter in college, loves hiking in Colorado, or has an important presentation next week, a man who is truly listening may bring it up naturally later. He doesn't need to memorize her entire life. He simply notices what matters to her. And when she speaks, he doesn't stare at his phone, constantly scan the room, or interrupt to correct insignificant details. Sometimes the most confident response is simply, "Tell me more about that," because he isn't afraid that listening will make him less interesting. This is especially powerful for an older man because he has an opportunity to bring something different to the interaction: patience. Younger men may feel pressure to impress quickly, but a mature man can allow a conversation to breathe. He can pause before answering, ask a thoughtful question, and actually absorb what was said instead of racing toward the next punchline. Think of it like a good jazz musician. He doesn't play over every note. He knows when to leave space. And when a woman feels genuinely heard, she may begin noticing something deeper than his words: the emotional atmosphere she experiences when she's around him. Topic 7. His emotional energy. There's something women can often sense before they can explain it: the emotional energy a man brings into the room. An older man can be successful, well-dressed, intelligent, and confident, yet still make people feel uncomfortable if he carries constant resentment, bitterness, or desperation. On the other hand, a man who has been through difficult seasons but still has a sense of humor, curiosity, and calm can create a completely different atmosphere. He doesn't need to announce that he's emotionally stable. People tend to feel it through the way he responds to ordinary situations. Consider what happens when something doesn't go according to plan. The restaurant is crowded, the reservation is delayed, traffic is terrible, or a conversation takes an unexpected turn. One man immediately becomes irritated and starts complaining about everything around him. Another takes a breath, makes a light comment, and adjusts without turning a small inconvenience into a personal crisis. That doesn't mean he never gets angry or never has bad days. It means his emotions don't control every interaction. A mature man can acknowledge frustration without allowing it to become the personality everyone else has to deal with. And this is where an older man's history can either become his greatest strength or his greatest obstacle. Every man carries something from his past: failed relationships, disappointments, victories, regrets, lessons. But a woman can often sense whether those experiences have made him wiser or simply more cynical. A man who says, "My last relationship taught me a lot," creates a very different impression from one who spends 20 minutes explaining why every woman he's ever dated was the problem. The difference is emotional maturity, and once she senses that maturity, another question naturally begins to surface. Does this man have a life that already feels meaningful? Or is he secretly waiting for a woman to make it meaningful for him? Topic 8. Whether his life looks full without her. One of the most powerful things a woman may notice in an older man is whether he actually seems to enjoy the life he already has. A man who has his own interests, friendships, routines, goals, and passions gives off a completely different energy from someone who seems to be waiting for a relationship to rescue him from boredom. This doesn't mean he has to live an extraordinary life or travel the world every month. It can be as simple as having a project he cares about, staying active, meeting friends for coffee, playing golf, reading, volunteering, or working towards something that gives his days meaning. There is an important paradox here. The less desperate a man is to be chosen, the more attractive his presence can become. If he treats every woman he meets as his potential last chance at love, pressure enters the interaction almost immediately. But when he genuinely enjoys his own company, he can approach dating from a place of curiosity rather than need. Imagine a man saying, "I'd love to spend time with you, but I already have a good life, so I'm interested in seeing whether we make each other's lives better." That's very different from silently communicating, "Please become the missing piece of mine." For an older man, this may be one of his greatest advantages because he has had time to build something that can't be manufactured overnight. His friendships, experiences, skills, health, routines, stories, and personal goals can create a sense of substance that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. The goal isn't to build a perfect life just to impress women. It's to build a life that he would still respect if nobody were watching. Because when a man reaches that point, dating stops being about convincing someone that he's valuable and starts becoming about discovering whether the two of them genuinely belong in each other's lives. Conclusion. At the end of the day, the most important lesson isn't about finding 8 tricks to make women notice an older man. It's about understanding that the things people notice first are usually reflections of the man underneath. His posture, grooming, confidence, character, ability to listen, emotional energy, and the life he has built all communicate something before he ever tries to explain himself. And here's the uncomfortable question. If a woman could see the way he lives when nobody is watching, would she see a man he is genuinely proud to be? So he should look at his own life honestly. Does he take care of himself? Does he walk into a room with confidence without needing approval? Can he handle rejection without becoming bitter? Does he listen instead of constantly trying to impress? Does he have a life that feels meaningful even when he's alone? These aren't just dating questions. They're questions about the kind of man he has decided to become. And if even one of those areas needs work, that's not a reason for shame. It's an invitation to start changing it. Because getting older isn't the part a man should fear. Becoming older without becoming wiser is. The goal isn't to compete with younger men or pretend to be someone he isn't. It's to become so comfortable, capable, healthy, and grounded in his own life that he no longer needs to chase validation from anyone. So, which of these 8 things do you think women notice first? And which one do you believe most men completely underestimate? Share your answer in the comments. And if you want more videos about confidence, relationships, attraction, and becoming a stronger man as you get older, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.